Once upon a time, Spain seemed to hold the entire world in the palm of its hand. In the 16th century, the title of the world's largest empire belonged not to Britain, but to Spain. For the first time in history, a single crown ruled a global empire spanning multiple continents, stretching from Europe and Africa to the Americas and Asia. Its dominion was so vast that people began to say, "The sun never sets on the Spanish Empire," a phrase that would later be adopted by the British. Yet this is where the contradiction lies. The richest empire the world had ever seen ultimately collapsed under the weight of its own wealth. And the reason this story matters today is quite simple. Just as Spain once did, societies often confuse sudden inflows of money with real wealth, and the collapse that follows is always devastating. When Spain reached the New World after 1492, it was as if it had won an endless jackpot. Gold and silver flowed into Spanish lands in quantities beyond anything European kingdoms could even imagine. The conquest of Mexico in 1521 destroyed the Aztec Empire and opened access to the rich silver mines of Zacatecas. 10 years later, the collapse of the Inca Empire in Peru revealed the enormous silver mountain of Potosi, a mine so deadly that it came to be known as the mountain that eats men. For more than a century, this single source fueled an uninterrupted chain of treasure ships crossing the Atlantic. Between 1500 and 1650, Spain is estimated to have imported approximately 180,000 tons of silver and 2,000 tons of gold. More silver than all of Europe had produced in the previous 1,000 years combined. This flood of precious metal did not merely transform Europe, it reshaped the structure of global trade. From ports such as Seville and Cadiz, Spanish bullion traveled east to the Mediterranean, north to the Low Countries, and west across the Pacific to Manila, where it was exchanged for Chinese silk and porcelain. This process marked the emergence of the first truly global economy, and Spain stood at its center. For modern Americans, the comparison is striking. When Jamestown, England's first permanent colony, was founded in 1607 as a swamp settlement struggling to survive, Mexico City already had universities, printing presses, and magnificent cathedrals. Lima was a growing metropolis. St. Augustine in Florida, founded by Spain in 1565, had already become the first permanent European settlement in what is now the United States, more than 40 years before Jamestown. Spain was not merely ahead of its rivals, it was building global infrastructure, while England and France were struggling to keep their colonies alive. And yet, despite all these rivers of silver, the empire was hollow at its core. Spain confused treasure with real wealth. The metal itself was real, but the way it was used turned strength into fragility. Prices across Spain rose rapidly. Between 1500 and 1600, inflation spiraled out of control, with prices quadrupling over the course of a century. While the country sat atop mountains of silver, ordinary Spaniards struggled to afford basic necessities such as bread and clothing. The reason was simple. Money only retains its value when it is sufficiently scarce. When excessive amounts of money enter an economy, purchasing power erodes. Imagine a town where a loaf of bread sells for 1 coin. Suddenly, 10 times more coins enter circulation, yet the number of bakers and loaves remains the same. Sellers raise prices, not because the bread has improved, but because the coins themselves are worth less. This was exactly Spain's experience. Economists later called this the price revolution, the first major wave of global inflation driven by too much silver chasing too few goods. This destruction did not affect everyone equally. Those who came into contact with the silver first, nobles, merchants, and bankers, profited before prices adjusted. Ordinary people living on fixed wages were left behind. The bitter irony was this: the more silver Spain brought in, the poorer its people felt. What should have been a blessing turned into poison. The mistakes did not end there. Instead of investing in domestic production, Spain spent enormous sums on foreign goods. Italian merchants, Dutch traders, and German craftsmen grew rich selling luxury products to Spain, paid for with silver from the Americas. Spanish industry weakened. Why build factories or develop trade networks when treasure fleets arrived regularly? Spain turned into a consumer economy, while its rivals reinvested relentlessly. At the same time, Spanish rulers poured staggering amounts of money into war. The Habsburg dynasty saw itself as the defender of Catholicism after the Reformation, and the cost of that mission was astronomical. Silver, from the Americas financed wars against the Ottoman Empire, the suppression of the Dutch Revolt, and interventions in the French Wars of Religion. The 30 Years' War alone devoured immense resources. Even the famous Spanish Armada of 1588, sent against Protestant England, was financed with New World silver. The Armada's failure was not only a military defeat but a financial shock. So where did all this treasure go? Into battlefields, fleets, and debt. Spain was not merely spending the silver that arrived. It was borrowing against shipments that had not yet arrived. Powerful German banking families such as the Fuggers and later Genoese financiers extended massive loans in exchange for future silver deliveries. On paper, this seemed brilliant. In reality, it was disastrous. When fleets were delayed, wrecked by storms, or captured, Spain defaulted repeatedly. Bankruptcies were declared in 1557, 1575, 1596, and 1607. Imagine being the richest empire in the world and still declaring bankruptcy every few decades. Into this fragile system stepped pirates, not as ordinary criminals, but as instruments of economic warfare. England and the Netherlands understood that capturing treasure fleets did not merely steal silver, it destroyed Spain's credit system. Acting with the support of Queen Elizabeth, Francis Drake plundered Spanish ships and returned with loot equal to half of England's annual revenue. In 1628, the Dutch privateer Piet Hein captured an entire treasure fleet off the coast of Cuba, worth 11 million guilders. A single blow nearly collapsed Spain's financial structure. Each lost fleet was not merely a misfortune at sea, it meant an immediate sovereign default. Spain had mortgaged tomorrow's wealth, and when pirates or storms seized it, creditors across Europe were left unpaid. Meanwhile, England and the Netherlands reinvested the captured silver into their navies, banks, and trading companies, laying the foundations of their future empires. Spain's lifeblood became its greatest weakness. Spain could have used this wealth to build a sustainable economy. It could have invested in industry, encouraged innovation, and established a fair tax system. Instead, it treated silver as an endless fountain and fell into debt dependency. Borrowing against future shipments became routine. If the silver arrived, debts were paid. If it did not, bankruptcy followed, and often it did not arrive. By the early 1600s, Spain still appeared powerful on maps, but financially it was hollow. Inflation had destroyed domestic prosperity. Debt had bound the crown to foreign bankers, and piracy had drained the empire's lifeblood. Ordinary Spaniards faced rising prices, stagnant wages, and increasing taxes to fund endless wars. The richest empire in the world was slowly consuming itself. Other powers watched this carefully. England, the Netherlands, and later France realized that bullion alone did not create lasting power. Spain had built an empire of plunder based on mines and treasure fleets. Its rivals built systems instead. Britain developed productive colonies, trade networks, chartered companies, and banking institutions. The Dutch established stock exchanges and turned their navy into a weapon of global trade. These systems generated wealth continuously. This was the decisive difference. Spain measured wealth in metal. Its rivals measured wealth in structure. One is finite, the other multiplies itself. By the mid-17th century, Spain's decline was undeniable. Its navy had weakened, financial trust had eroded, and its rivals had surged ahead. The empire that once terrified Europe became a shadow of its former glory. And this story is not only about Spain. It is about the illusion of wealth. Whenever money floods an economy, whether from mines, credit, or printing presses, the temptation is always the same: to spend it, to borrow against it, and to assume it will never end. Without discipline and productive investment, money corrodes society from within. Spain's collapse remains a warning that still echoes. Treasure is not wealth. Money is not security. Real wealth comes from durable systems, productivity, and institutions that endure. History does not repeat itself exactly, but its patterns are unmistakable. The question is not whether history will repeat, but whether we will recognize the warning in time.